If you enjoy the channel and our video content and would like to support us, you can do this in a couple of ways. You can sign up to our Patreon site, which is a monthly subscription to one of our 4 tiers, each giving you something different from early access interviews up to exclusive unseen footage. There's also the option of a one-off donation via PayPal, which allows you the option to donate an amount of your choice. Both options really help to keep this channel going and to continue putting out regular content for you good folk. So please take a look at aircrewinterview.tv/donate, and I thank you in advance. Thank you and enjoy. And you kind of mentioned it before, but Bob, do you have any memorable stories from your time flying the C9?
Yeah, the C9, it was never the same thing twice. I was always different every day, which was great, kept it interesting. I do remember one of the things I remember really a lot was that urgent we did up to North Dakota for the people that had the stove blow up on them, because they were very injured, and we were very concerned about them. And it was that was one of the things. We also went down to Mexico once. It was not a military member or dependent, and I don't know how we got involved with this. It was obviously done through diplomatic channels, but we went down to Mexico. I think we flew into Monterrey or Guadalajara. I can't remember where, but we flew into a civil field down there to pick up another burn victim. This one was a bad situation. A younger gentleman had decided to commit suicide by pouring gasoline on himself and igniting it, like the monk did over in Vietnam in the 60s. And he was unsuccessful in his endeavor. And of course, burns are really horrific. So we went down to Mexico and picked him up, and he was in a very bad way. We had doctors with us as well. This was, of course, in the middle of the night. Everything happens in the middle of the night in the C9. Took him up to Kelly, which is in San Antonio, and flew as fast as we could. There were really no customs things to deal with. They got all that pre-cleared up, so that was great. Took him just as fast as we could, and we just felt horrible about the situation. He did not make it, sadly, but we flew as fast as we could and to get him there. And that was just heartbreaking because everybody had done everything they could. But when the doctor comes up and says, yeah, you can slow down now, it's just a terrible feeling. So I remember that. We did have a lot of premature labors, and that was always a very urgent situation where not every military installation has a hospital. A lot of them just have a small clinic, which is, maybe one doctor or even a nurse. And when a military spouse or military member would go into premature labor, we'd pick them up a lot. And then it was on. And it was like we needed to get there quick because there's a woman in labor. I did have a couple of babies born on my airplane. It was
wow.
It was amazing. I mean, it was so great. We really wanted to get them to the hospital on time, but of every airplane to have it, the airplane had vacuum lines, had oxygen lines. It was fully plumbed. It was originally designed such that there was an area in the front that they could do surgery in. Now, I've never seen that, but you can definitely deliver a baby there. I know that for a fact. So, that was always great. I'm grateful that the 2 times that happened to me, the babies were early, but perfectly healthy. They made it, got the mom and the baby to the hospital. It was wonderful. That's the reason I wanted to go to the C9. It's like a lot of real operational flying, and it was just great to help these people out. And I know they'll never forget it. And the babies will always hear about it for the rest of their lives, too. I'm sure they're 30 years old now. But, it was a very rewarding thing. Not a lot broke on the airplane. I never really had any problems on the C9 mechanically. Did have, when I talked about the 8 legs a day, that would have a lot of times end up being very short legs. And sometimes you'd end up diverting because you just couldn't get in a place. And I do recall once we were doing a flight up in the northeastern U.S., which there's a lot of airports really close to each other up there. And we had quite a bit of fuel on board when we started. We went into Charleston, West Virginia, and we did an approach, couldn't see it, went around, tried it again, couldn't see it. So we diverted to our next airport, which I want to say was Allentown, Pennsylvania. I'm not positive of that. I can't even remember. Went there, which is not that far away. Weather was bad. Did an approach, couldn't get in. We did one more approach. I won't hang around for more than two. Couldn't get in, and then diverted to Andrews, which is up there by Washington D.C. And by now, fuel is a problem. It's the winter. It's snowing like crazy. Go to Andrews, and we ended up doing we were one of the few airplanes that could do Category 2 approaches at the time, down to quarter mile or 1,200 RVR, and did a Cat 2, barely saw the runway, landed, stopped, and put the brakes on the airplane, and it just kept sliding. And I was glad that Andrews has like 11,000 feet of runway, because we turned off at the very end. We had gotten runway reports of well, they measured it a different way, but basically fair braking, and we were certainly good for that. But as it turned out, it was pretty much an ice rink, so we taxied back very slowly with not a whole lot of gas in the airplane. Wow. That was one of the more nail-biting moments, and it affected me positively, since after that I've been much more cautious about fuel planning. Even though the fuel plan was good when we started, probably I should have diverted to Andrews earlier in retrospect. So it was a learning experience. The other guy that I was with now flies for another airline, and we both are pretty conservative in our fuel planning and not hesitant to ask for more gas if we need it. So that was a good thing. But you'd see occasionally things like that. The shortest leg I ever did was we went from MacDill Air Force Base to Tampa International. And if you don't know where that is, it's right across the bay. It's like about a 10-mile direct flight. We didn't even get the airplane completely deconfigured. We just got the gear up and then put we had to brief everything on the ground. It was a general's wife was going for a consultation. So whatever the case may be, that was the shortest flight I've ever done in an airliner. But yeah, people familiar with the Tampa area will think that's a ridiculous flight, and it was actually. But yeah, we had a great time. It was awesome.
So how would you sum up the C9, and did you enjoy your time on it?
Oh, I love the C9. Yeah. C9, it was my first airliner type. I mean, I've gone on since I went to the airlines to fly a lot more hours in the basic type. The MD-80 is a DC-9-80, so it's the same type rating in the U.S. I've gone on to fly a lot more. I like the airplane. The only thing I'll say negative about the airplane is, and it's been like this since the first one was built to the last one was built, was you don't want to be in that airplane when you de-ice, because the window by the cockpit, cockpit windows, they leak really bad, and they'll let that de-icing fluid into the cockpit. So you'll need to have a bunch of napkins or paper towels up there with you, because it's just going to come right in the bottom corner of the window. Other than that, that's really all I can say negatively about the airplane. I flew it a lot. I flew 3,100 hours in the C9 in the Air Force before I got out. I flew about another 8,000-ish in the MD-80 series. Wow. So what is that? 11,000 some odd hours in the general airplane type. And it was a great airplane. I mean, it's mostly gone now, but it was built to last. There's still a few DC-9s flying around in cargo outfits in the U.S. still. It's just crazy to see one, but there's a few out there. So Douglas built them tough. They were tough airplanes. Loved the airplane. The Air Force kept them in great shape. They were in the civilian world, we'll use the minimum equipment list and placard stuff inoperative per the procedures pretty often to keep the flight moving. In the Air Force, I think maybe in that 3,100 hours, maybe 5 times I saw something inoperative.
Wow.
I mean, it was just, I never once flew the airplane with an inoperative APU, which is a big deal. I never I never flew it with an inoperative autopilot. It just everything worked on the airplane. The Air Force was great about keeping them up. People were awesome. I really enjoyed my time on the airplane. If they're all retired now, but they were a great bargain. The Air Force got their money's worth out of them. They were an outstanding aircraft. I just have nothing bad to say about it.
Brilliant stuff there, Bob. So what was it like for you transitioning to, military to, the airline world? Was it a difficult transition for you?
It wasn't, because I think partially because I'd wanted to be an airline guy since I was younger, and I'd already read a lot and studied a lot, and the Air Force, in their wisdom, decreed, well, it's kind of one of those things where, one wing commander gets it, so another one wants it. There were 3 VIP C9s up at Andrews, and they flew the vice president around.
Oh wow!
And I never did that, but that was their big job, as they flew Air Force Two most places at the time. And I got to go on one of them once. It was a very nice airplane. I never flew one, but so the guys up at Andrews that were flying the VIP airplanes, they all, when they went to the simulator, their wing commander proudly wanted them to all get ATP, Airline Transport Pilot License, with DC-9 type ratings, even though we were not required as Air Force pilots to have a civilian license of any sort. They wanted all their guys to have that, and they were proudly saying, yep, all our guys, they're current and qualified, and they all have ATPs with DC-9 type ratings. And so our commander then decided, well, if they can do it, we can do it. So when you upgraded to instructor, if you were willing to go take the ATP exam, you had to have 1,500 hours of time. So as soon as I upgraded and had 1,500 hours, I went and took the written. Next time you went to the sim, they'd have the FAA come along, give you your oral exam, they'd give you your sim check, and at the time we had to go fly the airplane to get the rating, and they'd fly a trainer up from Scott, and we'd go do 3 touch and goes in the airplane with the FAA on board, and we'd get a brand new ATP certificate with DC-9 type rating. Well, that is exactly what the airlines are looking for when they hire, is that license. So I always thought it was kind of curious that the Air Force was giving you the keys to get out, really. And I didn't think that was wise, but hey, if they're going to give it to me, I'll do it. So when I transitioned, I separated. After Desert Storm, I'll go back. After Desert Storm, they had a big wind down in the number of pilot slots, and they grounded a lot of airplanes, did a lot of base consolidation. They had too many pilots. And this is the story of the Air Force. They either have too few pilots and they're getting bonuses, or they have too many pilots and they're getting rid of people. So they had too many people after Desert Storm, and they came down with a thing that says, if you've been flying for a total of 4 years and you want out, we'll let you out free. You'll waive your rest of your active duty service commitment. You can get out, you can leave. And I thought about this, and I was ready. I had my 3,000-ish hours in the 9 at the time, and my ATP all done. And I was flying a ton, and so I knew I was pretty desirable. So I was the second guy up that was eligible to get out. And the first guy up came up for an assignment, and they said to him, well, we want you to go be, I don't remember what it was, like in the command post in some outlying station. He didn't want to do that. Well, in the Air Force, you could turn down the first assignment, but whatever they gave you the second one, that was yours. And so they were trying to send a signal. They made him, I believe it was the commissary inventory officer in Incirlik, Turkey. And then he decided to get out. And I was the next guy up, because all of us wanted to keep flying, and I was like, well, they're clearly trying to give us non-flying jobs to make us get out. So I put in my papers and got out, and they, let's just say, when did you want to get out? And I said, well, I'd like to get out in 6 months. And they didn't have to honor that, so they gave me a separation date in 6 weeks. So frantically, I started sending out applications. I got called for interviews right away, got hired right away. So I had basically 2 weeks of unemployment after I got out of the Air Force, went to training. I initially was a 727 flight engineer, which was a great gig if you were transitioning from the military to the civilian world, because you didn't actually have to fly the airplane, and you could sit back and watch the 2 guys that had been there a while do their stuff, and you'd learn how the airline stuff works. So that was good. And I did that for a year and a half, and then got furloughed for almost 4 years. Worked in the training environment on a couple of different programs during my furlough, and then came back in '96, I guess. And I've been flying ever since, flying constantly ever since. And it was a very easy transition because I was flying an airline type, albeit with different procedures. It was a matter of learning the airline's procedures and how they do it. But it was a very easy transition. I think it was much easier than a guy coming out of the single seat world. It's a lot more of a challenge because they're not used to working with a crew. They're not used to working in an airplane this large. They don't know when to call different people, like call ramp now. Well, I don't know what ramp is. They just don't know. I did a lot later on of training those guys as a line check airman and as a check airman and instructor. And the guys that came out of the single seat world, they had great hands. They all flew outstandingly. They were sharp, smart, great guys, but they had a little more difficulty adjusting to the just the big airplane and airline environment because they just never done it before. Whereas guys that came out of the commuter world, they were flying a bigger airplane with a different company with different procedures, but they knew how the whole airline thing worked. Like, when do I call who how do I, what do I do now in the flight? So I was pretty lucky in that I kind of had that idea from the C9 world. I'd flown into a lot of the big civil fields already and kind of knew how LAX worked and Philadelphia worked and Atlanta worked and all these other things. So that was pretty easy, actually.
So, Bob, I've got some personal questions for you here. Favorite aircraft you have flown?
Favorite aircraft I've flown, L-1011. Easy, hands down.
Wow.
No question. Best airplane I've ever touched. It was a great machine. I got in right at the end of it. Amazing airplane. So yeah, no question.
One you would like to fly, either past or present?
Easy. F-105. No question.
F-105? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I would love to have some F-105 time in my logbook. Yes, no question.
And where can we find you online? Because I know you have a book called Plane Crash. Maybe not the best title, but
well,
where can we find that online?
It's funny you mentioned the title. There is a book called Plane Crash. You can get it on Amazon, or you can get it on the Johns Hopkins University Press website as well. It's normally cheaper on Amazon, either amazon.co.uk for you or amazon.com in the U.S. I met a mechanical engineering professor who had written another book about airplane accidents, and they wanted him to write a second book, but they wanted some first-person insight into the way the pilots interacted in these accident chains. So I was a co-author with a guy named Dr. George Bible of this book, and it is got chapters in there kind of organized by phase of flight, where there's one pre-flight ops, takeoff, climb out, cruise en route phase, approach and landing. There's different scenarios in there that we talk about. He's an engineer. I'm a pilot, so we had to overcome a little bit of
I can imagine.
Common ground sometimes was difficult. He did not really enjoy the mechanics of writing. My dad was an English professor. I like writing. I like reading. So I became kind of the wordsmith of the two of us. The book sold very well for a nonfiction book. It's still in print. We did not choose the title of the book. Turns out when these big presses now put a title on your book, they do it based on, to a degree, how search terms are going to be finding the book online. So they knew that if you were looking for a book on plane crashes on Amazon, the title Plane Crash would be the big hit. I wanted Mistakes on a Plane because I thought it was funny. Because at the time, that Mistakes on a Plane had just come out with Samuel Jackson, but they didn't go for that. But the book is available, and you can get me. I don't have big. So my wife and I kind of cut the lines with social media because it was taking way too much of our time. But I do have a Gmail. It's Robert I Hedges, all one word, at gmail.com. And if you email me there, I'll get back to you. I'm out flying Right now we're flying like crazy because it's the summer and we're still undermanned after COVID. So we're still flying a crazy amount. So if I don't get back to you right away, I will get back to you eventually. But that's the easiest way to get in touch with me.
Great stuff. And we'll link everything in what Bob said in the description. But can we see a book in the future, Bob?
George wants to do another book. Johns Hopkins wants another book. I'm not sure my marriage would survive another book. Like, it was 4 years. I admire these guys. Like, I just got the Tug Wilson books in the mail. Ordered them from, and he was one of my favorite interviews, by the way, on Eric Interview.
Yeah.
Totally, just what a great guy. But I just got his books, and the fact that he's got 2 out and he's writing the Tornado pilot, which I can't wait to read as well. I don't know how these guys do it. It was 4 years of research and basically all of my waking non-flying hours spent on that book. So I would like to write another book at some point. I don't know that it will be a co-written with anyone, but yeah, at some point I would expect you'll see something else. I don't know exactly what it'll be or when it'll be out, but stay tuned.
Yeah, watch the space, folks. But Bob, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. And yeah, the C9, it's been brilliant. So like, I've learned a lot along the way. So Bob, thank you very much.
You're certainly welcome. It's been a pleasure, Mike. I appreciate you having me on. I'm really honored, given some of the guys you've had on this channel. It's just amazing as historically some of the people you've had on. I'm just thrilled to be here. So thanks for having me.
Cheers.